Hello everybody and welcome to the Photoshop lesson number 3. Today we're going to explore the Camera Raw dialog box and some of the things that you can do with that: color correcting, brightness, darkness, syncing photos, monitor and record your color temperature, and using vibrance over saturation, and maybe a few other things on the way. I have some pictures already selected for this, and what I'm going to do first is I'm going to open some Camera Raw images in the Camera Raw dialog box. They should open in that, by the way, automatically. And let me do that again for you. Select the first image I'm going to open, hold the Shift key, and select the last image. All four of those will open. Now if I just right click on that and say open, they will automatically open in the Camera Raw dialog box. And the reason that is because they are Camera Raw files. I'm going to show you some things about this. There's a film strip showing all four of the pictures. If I click on the thumbnail in it, I can work on the individual photo I want. We'll look at some ways to sync that later on. I'm going to show you one tool right off, and that's the white balance tool. When I float the pointer over it, that comes up, and you'll notice that over here in the histogram that there's a lot of blue on the right. That means there's probably a lot of blue in the sky, but maybe with other things as well. I'm going to click on a known white substance here, and that's the cloud. And I do that, and you can see the color improves. Also, I'm going to brighten this up a little bit by changing the exposure and brighten it up. Some of that certainly is subjective, but I think you might see that that's a better picture now. Sometimes when you're shooting, you can put a gray card in the photograph, and that allows you to use this white balance tool on the gray card. If I click on that, that will adjust the color to a neutral color. If there are points on that that are slightly different, I can do that. But you get the idea that this particular card has been made for photographers, and it's neutral color balance. That is, all levels of red, green, and blue are equal in that, and that allows me to make an adjustment to that picture by clicking on that. Got to have it in the light that's illuminating everything, of course. We can also correct over and under exposed pictures. In this case, I'm going to adjust the exposure up a bit, just like that. And I'll use that white balance tool on something that's probably neutral. Can adjust it even more if I want. That's pretty good. I like that. And I have a picture here where I've got a lot of things that have different colors. Can't click on that. If I click on the red with that white balance tool, it'll make the picture cyan. Over in the white balance, I'm going to go to As Shot, and I'm going to use the white background to do that. And I click on that. It's now fairly neutral. You can tell that by looking up here at the RGB numbers. When I do that, if they're close and they're 221 across the board, that tells me I've got a neutral color. In a Camera Raw image, I can also see what color temperature works. In this case, it's 4150. On my camera, if I'm using this lighting again, I can initially set it to 4150 and know that I'll be getting a fairly accurate color out of that picture. Let's go look at some other things now. I'll cancel all of that and come back here, and I'm going to show you some other things in this. I'm not going to get to all these pictures, but what I'll get to we'll talk about. And again, I can show you some of these things in Photoshop. Didn't want to go all of them in Photoshop. My mistake. Didn't want that one. Those I'm going to use in Camera Raw in just a moment. But one of the things we're going to look at is vibrance and saturation. I just wanted to remind you in Photoshop that we have the sponge tool. The sponge tool, I can desaturate or saturate something. I think the green back there is a little oversaturated, so I'm going to desaturate that. And I'm going to go for a flow of about 28%, and that takes that bright green down a bit to where it's not distracting from my main subject, the young woman in the picture. Just like that. And I'm not going to save this, but that's something you can do in Photoshop. What we're going to do with these now is open them in Camera Raw. It's an option I have. I want to show you that the colors in something, these look pretty pure. But if we put the white balance tool over it and look over here, if it's red, there will be no green and no blue. And that's not the case. There is a little green and blue in that. And the blue, if I put the pointer over that and the numbers over here, they're not exclusively blue. Those are two primary colors. And in the green as well, there's the green does go up, but there are some other colors mixed. This really can help, and yellow is a combination of red and green, so that's something we'll explore later on. Want to look at the next picture now, though, and to me that looks very blue, and we can look at the histogram again and see that, yeah, there's a huge blue spike there. So I'm going to click on the picture, and that cleans it up pretty easily. If I look at this next picture and float the pointer over the background, it says 233 across. That's as close as you can get in a photo as shot as there is. This photographer, a former student, really knew what he was doing when he set his camera. He knew what color temperature by having explored pictures in Camera Raw. On this picture we looked at before, when we were in Photoshop in an earlier lesson, I'm going to click on the background, and you see it doesn't adjust that contrast. Maybe click again in another spot. You see that the color shifts off over here, but we don't get a really high contrast shift, and yet we can get a fairly accurate white with that. And when we tried this with an auto setting in Photoshop, it just didn't work at all. So I'm going to use the white balance tool on it, and you can see that that's a much better picture than we had in the previous lesson. And if you look at the histogram up here, we no longer have a spike in colors. That worked pretty good with that. I want to show you something else now in this picture that we'll look at a lot. This picture is not something you'll see. When you go in, your brain's going to make everything that is white look white. You're not going to be able to change that. And the camera cannot do that. The camera sees different illumination areas where there's fluorescent, incandescent, etc. And it's going to record it by the color temperature that's present. If I take this white balance and take it on this white dresser and click it, well, that goes white, but look what happens to the rest of the image. If I go over to this white chair now and click on it, that goes back to blue, and this area goes to yellow. If I go back to the white in the back now, it cleans up that area, but we're right back where we started from. In order to have something look like we have, sometimes the illumination source has to be adjusted. That's something that's going to give you several different options when you're looking at it. I'm going to look at something else now. In this, we can adjust the exposure and contrast, but I'm interested in vibrance and saturation. If I adjust this saturation up on this young woman, you can see her face starts to get pretty red. Go back to 0. Vibrance, to some extent, adjusts other colors, like her blouse, colors in the back, without affecting the face. Let's look at that again. Let's try that here, because we had this where we had the saturated area. If I want to saturate them more, I can take and adjust the saturation. And that green goes pretty green, but look at the face on the young lady. Doesn't work so well. Vibrance will adjust those greens and make them more intense without affecting her face. That's a great tool to use for that. I'm going to cancel that out now. I'm going to go to another folder and I'm going to look at these all at once. They're all camera raw. And something I can do now is I can take this first picture and say, you know what, I need to make it a little brighter. And I also need to adjust the color temperature a little bit. I'm going to try that on this. And I like that a little bit better. The background's black and that's okay. But what I want to do now is apply the changes I've already made to this to everything else. So I'm going to select all of them and go up here and go select all if I didn't get it, and then go sync settings. And I've got them all checked. I'm going to say OK, and it will change all of those to the same setting I used on the first one. If you've got a lot of pictures that are the same, that can be a great benefit. If you're shooting portraits at a wedding or at a prom or something, that's something you can do, and they'll all have now the same exposure and color as that first one. As someone owning a camera where I can program the white balance, I can take the color that I've adjusted, 4700, and set my camera to that number, so next time I won't have to do so much work. And that's how we do that. I'll cancel that. I think I got everything on there. There's one more here. I've got a low contrast image. Wrong choice there. And you can see again that all the tones are towards the middle here. I want to change that. I want to adjust the exposure. Might want to adjust the color balance on it too. There is an auto white balance. That seems to be a bit too much for me though. Too yellow. Let's adjust the exposure first. Make it a little brighter. Adjust the contrast. Stretch out those tones at the top. It's a low contrast scene, but I can do all of that here. Plus, if I want to do the saturation, if I want to desaturate it a little bit, up the vibrance a little bit. And there's also clarity. I can make it sharper or less sharp. I can do that here. I'm going to sharpen it up a bit right here. There are other panels in this. We're on the basic. There is a tone curve. There's detail. Lots of things you can do in the Camera Raw dialog box. And I would ask that you do please shoot in Camera Raw. I can give you a lot more suggestions, and you can control what you're doing a lot more when you do that as well. Again, if you have questions about any of this, please let me know. Please feel free to watch the YouTube video again. And again, if you have more, let me know the timestamp if you have a question. Thank you.